and not something else. So, good morning. Hey, look at that. People. It is morning. My name is Raf. I don't know if any of you guys follow me on Twitter. I'm White Rabbit on Twitter. I work for HP. And apparently we have a booth here that I didn't know about. That happens. We're a small company. This talk is getting it's getting more airplay than an AC/DC song in the 80s. I've done this a couple of times, 3 times in the last 2 days, as a matter of fact. It's an interesting genesis of anybody ever done red team exercises? Anybody? Bueller? One guy in the back that runs the Spider Labs red team. Hi, Nick. Okay, so I'm gonna rock because that's what I do. So here we go. So policy, I think, is a poor substitute for preparation. Agree, disagree? Anybody ever disagree with this? Good. Well, it's a good start. So how many of you guys know how to change a tire? Okay. How many of you guys have actually changed a tire? How many of you guys have changed a tire on the roadside in the dark while it's pouring rain and your girlfriend or wife is screaming at you to hurry the hell up? Right. So you probably know there's a big difference between reading the manual that says how to change a tire and doing it under serious duress. Yeah? Anybody watch Formula One? Any Formula One fans? All right, NASCAR fans? This is Detroit-ish. So if you ever watch those racing car types of events, you can watch in Formula One. They can take 4 tires off a car and put 4 new ones onto a car in 2.6 seconds. It takes me that long to blink. Right? It is ridiculously fast. You know what? Those guys didn't get that way by reading a manual. They practice that crap day in, day out, repeatedly, over and over, till they can do it in their sleep. Some of them literally can do it in their sleep. And some of them are still asleep because they're tired from the last night's practice. So the question really isn't, can you change a tire? It's, can you do it under severe duress? And what in the world does changing tires have to do with security? Well, I'll tell you. How many of you guys feel like you practice security? Okay, the fact that nobody's raising their hand is a little worrying. What does everybody else do here? Chief janitors. Okay. So, feel free to have a little fun with this. So, what does practice make? Hey, somebody's heard me before. Practice makes...
Follows, in whom I am well pleased.
God? Is that you? Uh-oh. I think I've offended somebody. Was that you messing with me back there with the microphone? Not funny. Let's try this again. So practice makes, usually everybody around this part says perfect, and actually it makes good enough. So if we practice often enough and do it often enough, it actually gets us to a state of good enough. So information security, what is the goal? Seriously, you guys are boring. What's the goal of information security? Thank you, Wolf. So it's, a lot of us are stuck, thanks. A lot of us are stuck in this mentality of, anybody here out there, by show of hands, wants to tell me that they're here to, they worked in the company they work for to prevent an attack? Interesting. How about prevent a breach? Interesting. How about prevent an incident? And those are different, right? Okay. How many of you guys are out there to survive an attack? Okay. So, you guys know the bear analogy, right? 2 hikers, one of them's running away from the bear, the other one's tying his shoes because he's got to outrun the guy behind him. Wrong. Because in this world, there are an infinite number of bears and they multiply like bunnies, get it? And they're everywhere. Okay, this has got to be a little bit funnier than that. Jeez, tough crowd. You guys are killing me. All right, so there is an infinite number of bad people out there, and the problem is you're not going to really run away from anything. You're just going to run into the next other thing, right? So it's not a matter of can you avoid anything. I'm going to say this with all the love in my heart for you guys in the world that raised your hand at the beginning of, when I asked, but If you think you're going to prevent anything, I posture that you're a little bit delusional. Because prevention in security is not, especially in the breach area, right? You can't prevent attacks. It's physically not possible. I can go attack you right now. You can't prevent it. Somebody in Russia can go attack you right now. The guy next to your next door neighbor can attack you right now. You can't prevent it. There's too many adversaries. You can't handcuff them all. We've tried. So the notion of resilience starts to come into play. And a lot of us can't define what this is. So resilience really means what? Particularly in the enterprise. What does it mean? Take a shot and bounce back. That's absolutely correct. It's how do you get back to business, okay? And those of us that have lived in the IT security world long enough know that getting back to business is number one. It's like the prime directive. Star Trek nerds? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, see, that gets a laugh. Sheesh, all right. So no Monty Python here, but we're going to go Star Trek. All right. Changes my entire slide deck. So getting back to business is the one important thing. Because you're not going to prevent anything. You're not going to really even avoid anything. I probably can promise you that during the course of your time at whatever company you work for, you might actually, the likelihood of you getting hacked is pretty good. The likelihood of you noticing is actually pretty bad, but the likelihood of you getting hacked is pretty good. So can you facilitate resilience? How many of you guys feel that you can facilitate resilience? Meh. Okay, great. So you're in a good spot then. I like to tell people that most of us probably can't, not very well, because what we're all stuck doing is security. Right? And security is a rough thing to be worried about when you can't even tell whether you've been breached or not. Sorry, this keeps falling and it's annoying the hell out of me. There we go. So, another quick show of hands, fun poll. How many of you guys have an enterprise security policy? Okay, keep your hands up if you've got a set of procedures for incident response. Keep your hands up if you have lots and lots of fun controls. Keep your hands up if you've got tons of blinky lights and technology. Everybody's hand should go up on that one. And if you don't have your hand in the air on this one, I'm curious. My question to all of you is, so what? Does any of it work? Anybody feel confident saying yes? Some? How do you know? Right? The notion of how the hell do you know any of this crap in the closet works? Well, the lights blink green when there's no bad guys. The light blinks red when there's bad guys. Kind of scary, isn't it? So, preparation, I think, is relative. And going back to my Formula One example, preparation turns into a very relative thing because you can practice something and practice something and practice something and practice something, and eventually you'll get it right, and you'll be able to be good at it. Right? This is why if you've ever driven past an airport where it looks like there's a plane on fire, anybody ever seen that? First time I saw that, scared the hell out of me. I'm like, what is going on at the airport? Well, that's the incident response team practicing. They do it about once a month. They set a fake plane on fire, and they do fire and rescue roughly once a month at all the major airports. Not because it's fun to set a big giant plane on fire and run inside it and risk your life burning to death, but because they need to practice and be damn good at it. Right? That Formula One team didn't get to 2.6 seconds on 4 tires because they read manuals or they tried it once or somebody told them how to do it once. Right? Some of these guys, there was an interview done, some of these guys practice 800 to 900 times in the course of a week. If your job on that Formula One team is the guy holding the gun doing this, that means you've done that 1,800 times in the course of a week. If muscle memory doesn't take over at that point, you suck at your job. More importantly, you suck as a human being, right? So preparation is relative. A lot of us prepare, but what do we prepare for? So you guys all know Josh Corman, friend of mine? Anybody know Josh Corman? Go read some of his stuff. Josh is a smart guy. Josh has been around for a while. He's turning into a dinosaur like I am, but he's been around for a while, and he says that the auditor is more your adversary than the hacker. You know why this is true? Because the auditor is guaranteed to show up and can disrupt your business if you fail an audit. The hacker, maybe. The auditor turns into your biggest enemy. How screwed up is that? How much of a problem is that for everybody's ego in here when we're off fighting the big bad APT? So how many of us, Nick and I had an interesting conversation last night about penetration testing. Anybody do pen testing here? Okay. So I said this yesterday in an audience that really didn't receive it well. Apparently there's a lot of penetration testers in the audience. I should have asked first. But penetration testing today largely has turned into an absolute freaking farce. Somebody runs a Nessus scan and says, hey, I pen tested you. That's not a pen test. That's an 8-year-old. Right? I was working with a friend of mine who runs a proper red team company, or a company that does penetration testing the way they describe it. He's like, yeah, we were doing an engagement, and we're including a social component to it, a human component to it. And he says, the IS guy, the IS manager basically said, you know what? The CEO and his staff are out of bounds. He's like, why? It's a phishing engagement. He goes, yeah, but they're out of bounds. They'll always fall for it. Are you kidding me? Don't look over there. We know that's bad. That kind of bugs me, right? These are staged attacks, stuff we prepare for. If you watch these, government exercises where they get a bunch of really smart people into a room and they lock them in there and they say, okay, tomorrow, if we wake up and the phone grid is down, what would you all do? And they come up with these awesome, wild ideas about how they need the big red button to turn off the internet and blah, blah, blah. You know how much all of that is bullcrap? You know how much any of that, they don't know any of that actually works because they're in a room playing with paper. Right? This is where a lot of us are today. Because we fear the hackers. Oh my God, they're going to come get us. Who? Why? And if you bought more blinking boxes and solutions and other stuff, will you be any more prepared than you are right now? These are all synthetic risks. You guys agree with me on this? Right? Synthetic risks are worthless. That's like preparing yourself for something that may or may not happen in a controlled environment. It's like WWE. No WWE fans around? All right. It's a lot funnier if you know wrestling. Not that I know wrestling. So let me ask you, I'll give you a what if. We've got these low quality attackers, right? They basically, somebody that can download a script, point it at a website, click go, and DDoS a site. Woo. Or you can download like SQL map and point it at a website and go, look, SQL injection, SQL injection, SQL injection, SQL injection, SQL injection. Not hacking. Not on any planet I'm familiar with. Right? These are low quality attackers. They exist everywhere. They're easy to thwart. You put up one roadblock and they give up and they go move on to something that's easier. They have no determination. Then you get the high quality attackers. What have we been talking about in the security industry for the last 20 years about high quality attackers? What's the one sentence everybody uses? No, not that. A determined attacker will always what? Win. They'll always succeed. This is true. I know, trust me, it's true. A determined attacker will always succeed, right? So we look at high quality, high impact, low probability attacks. Issues that we don't easily have because the high probability, high impact stuff shows up on all the vendor material. It shows up in all the APT Defender v2.0 Pro kind of stuff. Thought that would get a laugh. Right? But the stuff that makes the world go boom and creates a really nasty issue for us that isn't very likely, that's what we need to be worried about. Because we can practice against that. Because security might fail. In fact, screw that, security will fail at some point. And it's probably failed, you just haven't noticed yet, which is even worse. So anybody seen Fight Club here? Anybody Fight Club fans? The point of Fight Club isn't to hit somebody and they don't fall down and cry, right? It's not, the game's not over after the first punch. Which brings us back to this whole notion of resilience. People, process, technology, everything at some point will fail, trip over, fall on its face. The problem is, and the main crux of the issue is, can you get the hell back up and continue to beat away, right? Can you continue to fight? Because everything at some point fails. Ultra resilient clouds, Amazon, fail. Super security companies that hold the world's secrets, RSA, fail. Everybody fails, right? Everybody remember the show House, Dr. House? What does everybody do? And fail. You forgot to fail. So it's really easy with all those policies, the procedures, the training we've all gone through, the talks we've sat through, and the blinky lights we have, and the millions of dollars in investments that we've put in. It's really easy to feel safe. It really is. The problem is it's easier to feel complacent. So a lot of organizations feel very complacent, and that's a problem for me. So if you're not tested, I definitely think you're unprepared. And so right about now you're asking yourself, so what? Well, there's 4 steps to making this world a little bit better. I think validation is absolutely required in this case, right? You need to validate things like your defenses. You need to validate your response. So it's not just that you need to make sure that that IPS actually is in block mode, or that your firewall actually is in line with the network. You laugh, but it's happened. But you need to validate what happens when things go sideways in a bad way on a Friday night when everybody's hammered. Then what? You also need to validate your technology, because a lot of us have lots and lots of things in our wiring closets, in our server rooms. That's all security technology that really isn't doing us any good, except it's causing us more heartache because it's more dashboards to stare at. So I'm telling you right now that it's your job to go be attacked. So this is a good thing. And it's a good thing to be attacked minus all the cool restrictions. Don't pen test me between the hours of Friday 7 p.m. to Sunday morning, 8 a.m. On these 3 IP addresses. But hold on, not yet. We're not ready yet. That's crap. Here's the target. Go after it. Don't want to hear how you did it until you're done doing it. And right about this time, usually people stare at me like I've just fallen off the planet. I got some really weird looks from some law enforcement people yesterday, because nobody believed me. So there's a good bit of caution that needs to be used here, because random destruction of corporate property results in something called a resume generating event. In other words, you'll be out of a job. So I think red teams, if you've never done a red team exercise, or you've never hired a red team and you work in corporate IT, this is something you need to start thinking about very seriously, whether it's something you plan for or something you literally go out and do like tomorrow in some scope or fashion. So I really go red or go home, right? Pen testing as it is right now, unless you have a really well mature pen testing company you're working with, it's probably very little value for what you're paying for it, unfortunately. You're probably getting a rebranded, scan report where somebody's, gotten the shell on your box. Yay. Is there any meaning to that? Is there any context to that? Who knows? But they've gotten the shell. You've been exploited. You're vulnerable. Go patch it. Life will go on. Crap. All of it. So, anybody seen the movie What About Bob? Pop culture references? Baby steps, Bob. That's right. Bill Murray. If you've not seen the movie, go see it. It's freaking hysterical. Bill Murray plays a great neurotic psycho, whatever the hell he is. He's kind of creepy and kooky. But Bob basically, by a psychiatrist, is taught to take baby steps, and that's how we're going to get from where we are here to where we are to a company that's more resilient, an organization that's more resilient, not more secure. You're not going to catch me saying more secure, because the only thing I'll ask you, somebody said I'm more secure. The next question is then what? What is more secure, right? If you're more resilient, I can actually quantify that. Resilient is quantifiable. How long can you keep taking punches and get back up? So validation in this case is a journey. And listen, this is how we're going to do it. We've got a couple of steps here to avoid being a deer in the headlights. That's a deer. Go clip art. We're going to get you guys through this initial analysis paralysis, because if you ever worked for a large company, I have, and you get stuck in analysis paralysis, which means you can have meetings about who to invite to the meeting with the meeting. And by the time you get around to actually doing something, it's 3 years next, and you've gotten no value out of it. So here is the plan in 4 quick steps. 4 quick and easy steps. There's a major gotcha here. And at some point, you'll notice that I think there's a little bit of unconventionalism here. Hopefully, you pick up on it. So step 1 is an assessment. You absolutely have to do an assessment. All right? Assess it everywhere, all the time. The first step to doing a good assessment is figuring out where you are. In order to know where you want to go, you got to know where you're starting, right? Lots of those "you are here" maps are important. You know why the maps are so important for us? Because they don't just tell us where we want to go; they tell us where we are now, so we can get there. All right, that's the value of having a good mapping product, not Apple. And it's really, really, really important to make sure we get there, right? See, it's like Mr. Subliminal. So what are your defenses? How much of your defensive posture do you know right now? Like, what is it? If you had this, if I asked you right now, if I said everybody take a piece of paper out from underneath your chair and take the pen out from underneath your chair, there really isn't a piece of paper and a pen underneath your chair, at least I don't think there is, and write down all the defenses you have right now. How many of you guys feel comfortable that you do that? That you'd be able to do that? Yeah, that's not really comforting. Right? There's a lot of stuff you do defensively, and there's a lot of stuff that you do unconventionally defensively. You'll have to come see that talk next. But what are your defenses here? What is the defense that you're looking for, right? What is it today? What do you think it is today? Because you don't know yet. This is what you think. How prepared do you feel? How prepared are you? You know, is there a red team? Is a red book incident response manual? Are there procedures for when X happens, do Y? Thinking back about 10 years of my career, we had a fantastic incident response process. Step 1 of any incident response process after this transformation we went through, log on to there's a website that was 2-factor authenticated, SSL, mutually auth, beautiful thing. Right? Log in. Describe the incident. It would automatically route the ticket to the appropriate people, page the right folks, restart, reboot, terminate processes, all automatically. And then SQL Slammer hit. So step 1 of the process, log into the network's down. Now what? There were 10 of us standing in the room going, anybody know what we should do now? Because nobody ever thought to say, hey, what if this doesn't work? We've never been put in that scenario before. You know when we found out that our crap doesn't work? In the heat of battle. That is not a good time to figure out your stuff's not working. I promise. Like if the fire truck that shows up outside your house finds out that their pump doesn't work as your house is burning down, not good. I'm pretty sure you're not going to be very happy. So there's another question that's important to ask is, it's not just what's hackable, but what could break? What breaks? So there's brittle systems in everybody's organization, right? So there's 2 things that we're curious about here. Defenses, which is the hackable part, and then brittleness. You've all got these things in your organization that started out as somebody's pet project. They strung a couple of servers together, borrowed some licenses, installed some software. It was just going to be a prototype. We'll do security on it later if it works. Lo and behold, it works, and now it's production, and you're not allowed to touch it. Right? And if you sneeze anywhere near it, the whole thing comes crashing down, and you're fired. It's called a brittle system. Everybody has them. That's where all the ugly warts are in most of our companies. And then the major question is, how bad can it be? Right? So these are things we need to start thinking about. How bad is it going to be? What artifacts from the past do you have? Do you actually have a pen test report that somebody's done for you that tells you, yeah, we're pretty vulnerable? Do you have 7 pen test reports over the course of 7 quarters that all look the same? Because all they did was print out the same thing over and over because you haven't fixed a damn thing? Any empirical evidence at this point at the assessment phase will do. Once we're done assessing, right, basically the you are here or you think you are here, then we get to the planning stage. Let's figure out what we're going to do next. How are we going to plan for this? All right. So here's what's in scope. If we're talking about planning a red team exercise, your vendors, your partners, and yourself, pretty much everything. I have news for you. If somebody's going to come attack you, and I mean seriously attack you, come at you, they're not going to come knocking on the front of your website. They're going to go hit your kid on Facebook, infect the laptop that your kid browses Facebook on or plays World of Warcraft on that you bring to the office every day. That's the path of least resistance. That's the easiest way in. So you absolutely become in scope. Your neighbors become in scope. They'll Trojan your neighbors because you go over there and use their Wi-Fi all the time to watch Monday Night Football. Right? When you go over, bam, you're infected. You bring it back to the office. Voila. You're hacked. Bad elements don't discriminate here. There is no rules of engagement for evil. It's all out, right? There's no rules. The good guys, much like if anybody's got a military background, you know there's plenty of rules of engagement, right? You pretty much can't fire on somebody unless they've got 2 bullets in you already. Unfortunately, they don't care. They don't follow the same rules. So bad guys do not follow rules. And the fact that pen test teams do just proves the little value that most pen test exercises provide. So this tends to be very overwhelming, and it's a little bit scary to think I'm just going to go randomly put a bazooka to my corporate IT and see what happens. So strategizing needs to happen in little itty-bitty pieces. Much like Bob, we need to take baby steps. And so we're going to start with some small parts. Right? This is kind of where we're going to take mini red team stuff. We're going to start off with miniature exercises, small incursions. We're going to make that little app that we don't think is connected to anything, that probably nobody would notice if it was down. That'll be the first thing. Right? We'll tell the red team organization, bring back the database or the SA password or own that box and shut it down if you can. They will, but just know that that's going to happen. So start with something small and insignificant because you don't want a resume generating event, I promise. Something small and standalone. Emphasis on standalone. How many of you guys feel confident, emphasis on confident, that you know the interconnectedness of all of your applications in your data centers? Because you probably have this app that looks like it touches nothing else, but if you really dig into it, it shares databases with like the ERP system. Because you had some leftover capacity on that box and you didn't want to buy an extra license or whatever, right? Be very, very careful. Working into bigger units means that we need to start thinking about now what, right? Working your way up. So you start with something small autonomous unit, work your way up. If you work in a large conglomerate or you work in a large organization, you probably have a business unit that has sub-business units that have sub-business units that have, and we can keep going for a while probably in some of your cases. Even if you work in a small company, you start with at the very lowest common denominator at the application level, work up to department level, eventually work up to corporate level, right? The entire business unit then. And eventually, like in poker, we go all in. And we'll figure out how we get there as we progress through the rest of this. But everything is in scope, whatever it takes. This is the WIT, whatever it takes to execute that hack, execute that infiltration. This is just like real attackers do. But one small minor detail here, and the question is, who do you tell that you're going to be doing this? You don't tell your IT security team. I think that we agree on because you don't want them prepared, right? So who do you tell? Anyone? Anybody? Chief Legal Counsel? Somebody C-level, 1 or 2 people C-level, right? Senior Legal Counsel, Chief Risk Officer, maybe your CEO if you don't have any of those two. Pretty sure you've got a Chief Legal Counsel somewhere. Or lead attorney or something. It's good to be realistic because somebody has to know, but you want to tell as few people as possible, right? Because what's the point if everybody knows it's going to happen? But remember, always cover your apps. Always. Trusted leadership is a good spot for this. Going off and telling people about it is a good idea, but you want to tell somebody that you trust, that trusts you, to do this and execute properly without causing a calamity. And if you do, they'll have your back. Right? So phase 3 on this, action. Lights, camera, ready the ninjas, and start the validation. So let's do this in phases. How do red teams operate? Recon, understand your target. Acquire your target, figure out what the important thing is that you're going to go after. Pick targets that are high value, low risk. You don't want to be able to be seen, right? Anybody a fan of the of John Cleese and the Monty Python gang? Anybody seen How Not to Be Seen? On and Now for Something Completely Different? You don't want to be behind the one bush in the open field. They know where you are, right? If you're not familiar with it, it's funny. Go look it up. Infiltration. Find a way in. Not a matter of, it's not if, but it's how, right? Infiltrate. Get in there, establish a beachhead, find a base of operations. This is scary because as you look through your organization, sometimes you'll realize that there already are bases of operations for people that don't work for you inside your organization. Either they're legitimate, like maybe consultants or something, semi-legitimate, like consultants or something, or completely illegitimate, like consultants or bad guys or something. It happens. The next thing we do after you get a good beachhead, right, you got another good base of operations, is you do more recon. You do more looking around. Maybe you find a better target. Reevaluate that target that you had and see if it's still the target you want to go after. Because sometimes, quite frankly, we find that, hey, you know what, my target is going to be this one database over here, but you get in and you look around, you go, yeah, that database is nice, but man, that payroll over there looks a lot better, right? What's better to get at? Remember, high value, low risk targets. Exfiltration is another key. Work with I got a fun story about from a colleague of mine. The infiltration part was simple, right? The company was so bad at security, inbound, that they had a beachhead established in like a day. They looked around, found some cool stuff, knew what they were going to attack, attacked it, copied off an entire database. We're going to take it back with them. The problem is they couldn't get it out of the company. Like the exfil part was hard. They had managed to lock down really well, actually, the outbound part, outbound traffic. So, much like any red team, they improvised. They took it, basically compressed all that, put it on the receptionist's machine in the front of the office, because that wasn't behind the locked door, waited until after hours, came in with the cleaning crew, put a USB stick into it, copied it off, walked out. Easiest exfiltration in the history of mankind, right? Plug, copy, whoop, walk out. You already had the credentials. Logging into the machine wasn't rocket science. The idea of take everything is pretty important, right? Find what you want and just take all of it. And obviously, leave no trace and don't get caught. Right? It's good red team. Especially if you're doing physical red team, don't get shot at. Or if you do, run faster than the bullet. Here's the one unconventional part that I'll tell you that probably, this may be the first time you hear something like this, and it may kind of, maybe even shock you a little bit. I think, personal opinion, the best red team folks are not just the most technically skilled or the smartest necessarily, but they're the ones that keep the best notes. From a value to me, the company that's ordering this red team exercise perspective, I want somebody that's going to keep ridiculously good notes. Like OCD ridiculously good notes. Here's the other part of this. Before we get in the last phase, which is analysis. I want to see who here is brave enough. So what do you guys think is the one super key, one thing, the one thing that you absolutely have to do, and if you do it, incident response becomes much easier? Anyone? Guess. What's that? Time synchronization. Being able to synchronize all your systems on one clock, one basic clock, right? if you've ever done incident response or tried to figure out how somebody got in, and you've got 37 servers all off by about a second, at the rate packets travel, good luck. Because you'll be sifting through gigs and gigs and gigs of text logs, or maybe even on a pretty shiny screen, but you'll be looking at things in different time slices. You have to be on the same time scale. That's the one thing I'll tell you from a defensive perspective, incident response perspective. Synchronize your devices. Have a good time sync. So the prediction at the end of a red team exercise is stuff broke. Not stuff got hacked, stuff broke. Remember those brittle systems we talked about at the beginning? You know, that stuff that you can't sneeze around because it'll come crashing down and somebody will have to get fired? Something during a red team exercise generally breaks. This is different than pen testing because we try to avoid breaking anything at all costs. This is where we diverge. It's okay to break stuff. Why? Because during a real attack, things will break. You know how we find out what's the most brittle and what to fix first? After it's been broken. Not because we sat in a room and thought about it a lot. So the questions you want to start asking yourself, what broke and why? We're not even getting into the hacking piece of this yet. What broke and why? Why did that server over there fall over when they scanned this IP address? I literally worked on an analysis once a while back where we had a server that was in an entirely different data center, a database that just fell over for no apparent reason during roughly the same time frame as a infiltration exercise way on the other side of the earth in a completely different time zone, different data center, different everything. The only common denominator between the attack and the thing that fell over was there was a database involved in each. But we're like, okay, so dear company IT people, how are these related? They're not. Well, it's not coincidence. I can very much assure you of that. No, it must be coincidence. No, how are they related? They're not. Seriously, they have to be related somehow. Dug into it. Turns out there's a little database export that happens over here, gets FTP'd over here, loaded over here. There's a little bit of time shift, right? Because packets have to travel, get zipped. So compressed, dropped on an FTP, internally transferred, uncompressed, loaded into a database. And when we corrupted stuff over here, this database could handle corruption reasonably well. Like it could do error correction and stuff. This one over here was the brittle one. Nobody sneezed. And it just went poof, magically died. But they were connected. They discovered an entirely new link that IT never really realized between a bunch of different systems. So system resiliency failures happen pretty often during these types of exercises because we do DR drills, right? But how are disaster recovery drills always conducted? Well, we're going to gracefully shut down these machines over here, and then we're going to watch as these over here come up by themselves. How realistic is that? Hurricane Katrina hits. It's going to wait for you to power down your systems. No. It's going to just... How you're going to do DR is you're going to walk over to it and go, yank, power's out. Now what? Oftentimes what we find is all these really cool synchronization things that we've got going on, all these great failovers, Amazon, all this great stuff hinges on one piece that doesn't work if it's not done properly, right? If two databases come back up dirty, what happens? What end state do you end up in? How far back do you roll back? I mean, it could be 15 seconds. It could be however much battery was in that cache before it finished writing it to disk. Or it could be, I don't know, the database is dead. All of those are possible. You know how you're going to know? Yank. No problem. Come on, grab a seat. So root cause analysis. Anybody done this before? Root cause analyses? If you have, it's probably your least favorite thing in the world. Because it takes up a ton of whiteboard space. It takes up a ton of brain power, and you can't do it by yourself. You have to go talk to a ton of people. right? You have to understand how things are connected. This is well beyond the scope of most IT security things. So how about this? Let's move to the attack. Did the attack succeed? All right, forget that. Yes, it did. That's the wrong question. 100.1% of attacks succeed. Just kidding. No? The question we want to ask ourselves is how successful was it, right? It's not that they succeed or not. They most likely got in. They most likely got a bunch of good stuff, and you probably didn't notice. Or if you did, it was entirely too late and you could do nothing about it but go, oh, that sucks. As your security guard was nice and helpful in that helping that nice young lady carry that server out the door. It's only funny because it's true. So attacks rarely fail. There's 3 key measures here. Okay, there's 3 things that tell you how successful an attack was and how good your security actually is. So who here has a safe in their home? Okay. So they're probably all fireproof at some fire resistant. Yes? Now are they infinitely fireproof? Right. So pay attention. So there's 3 key measures. 1, time. Yes? You need to know how long can that thing stand in that burn before it turns into a pile of iron or whatever it is that safes turn into. Liquid metal goo with all your belongings and critical stuff inside somewhere, inseparable from what used to be your safe. What's really funny is safes that are battery powered, and the first thing that fries is the external panel. Sure, the safe still works. Well, the safe still did what it's supposed to, but you can't get back into it anymore. So it's a matter of how much time. How long did the attack take? How long did it take them to get in? How difficult was it for them, right? How much time did you get? So you've got all this security investment. How much time did that buy you? You bought a safe and you paid 20 grand for it. How much time does that buy you in a burning building? 20 grand, probably a lot. Make sense? So this is kind of like that Underwriters Labs fireproof rating. We don't think about security this way for some reason. It's baffling. It's like these fireproof ratings. How long can that fire burn and at what temperature? So what's the level of the attacker you want to defend against, high quality versus low quality, and how much time did you buy yourself with your investment? What's really sad is there doesn't seem to be a great correlation between how much money you've spent and how much time you've bought yourself. Because I've watched people with minimal investment have fantastic burn rates, burn times, right? Meaning that attack took forever to finally get through. Like they tried X and Y and Z and double Z and they kept going until they finally found a weakness. They finally found something, because they will. They've been attacks that have completely gone down the IT spectrum and eventually had to resort to basically infiltrating you with a person. Like posing as a janitor, for example, or whatever. Dumpster diving kind of stuff, because your IT is that good. So minimum amount of investment sometimes gets you to that high, long burn rate, but it doesn't correlate that a huge amount of investment gets that much longer, which is the scary part for a lot of us. Because there's plenty of CISOs out there who have no problem buying and buying and buying and buying and buying and not increasing their burn time, their resiliency. So the next measure here, next key measure is damage. How much damage was done during this attack, right? How extensive was it? And basically the answering the question, how bad was it? Now damage has 2 components. It is both what broke and then what got hacked. Make sense? Right? How bad was the damage along that attack path? The last key measure is criticality. How important to you was the stuff that was got, basically? How critical was the asset? What did they get? Right? Did they make off with your safe, or did they make off with your external partner database or something less important? Right? We have a level of criticality of everything in your organization. It can all be classified on a scale. There are things that are absolutely super important that can never get out. And there are things that if they got out, yes, they'd be embarrassing. Yes, they would hurt the company, publicly. Yes, somebody might even get fired. Your stock price might go down for a while, but in the end, you'll recover. There's a scale. And now comes the hard part, and this is why we keep really, 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 really OCD good notes. The full root cause analysis. What broke? What got hacked? How did it all happen? Why did it all go down? And how do we prevent it in the future? That's the fun part. So you follow this attack path. Time stamped. At this time, we attack this system using this exploit with the following result observed. Line by line, item by item. Where did your security fail? Was it at detection? Were you just not able to detect the issue? Were you just not able to provide proper analysis of things that were going on? A lot of us see security events from security things that have no business context to them. This is a bad thing. Because an attack is not an attack. Right? This is why context-aware systems became so important 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. When there's a SQL injection attack being levied against a NoSQL database, you probably don't care. When people are lobbing, IIS attacks at Java web servers, who cares, right? Context awareness, analysis. What about protection? Have you spent way too much money to protect the wrong things? Or did it even work? Was it people failure? People always fail, but how much do they fail? Who failed in your organization? More often than not, it's your security folks, because they're tired, they're overworked, they've got too many dashboards to stare at, and if it's not staring them in the face, they probably won't notice, because they're too busy doing security. Was it a process failure, right? Like in my case, did I run into step 1? Not available. Crap, now what? There's a bunch of people standing around going, step 1 of bringing that server back up is go to this directory. It doesn't exist. I don't know what to do now. There's a lot of technology failures out there. We trust devices we shouldn't. We leave we buy something, we put it in line, we assume that it's going to work forever, but we forget to care and feed it. If they did that with the zoo, there would be no animals to go see. Think about the stuff on your network as living, breathing things that have to be cared for, they have to be fed, they have to be maintained. They don't necessarily have to be rebooted all the time, but they have to be maintained. And if you've got more things to maintain than you have people, you have a problem. You have an unsustainable position at that point. I was talking about in a blog post that if the ratio of dashboards to humans is greater than 2-to-1, you've got a very serious issue. Is it an enterprise intelligence failure? Did you see a bunch of suspicious events on a security dashboard because your security team doesn't talk to the database team, they never found out that the number of records returned per query went up by 10,000%. In the database world, it's like, gee, that's interesting utilization. In the security world, it's like, gee, that's SQL injection. But we think about it differently. We don't see it the same way. A lot of us are unable to connect the dots in this because we don't have the full context. There's not the knowledge of what's going on around it. And then the difficult question, what's the remedy? How do we fix this problem? Yeah, we got hacked. We got hacked bad. Crap broke all over the place. Business ground to a halt for a few hours. Now what? How do we fix this? And unfortunately, a lot of this goes back to Defense 101. Detect, deter, and respond. Find things, get rid of them. Countermeasures, fortifying our defenses, and being able to impact things with a minimum amount of change and a maximum amount of impact. And we've been saying this for years, and business people will tell us this. Make as little impact as you can on me, on my developers, on my operations staff, on my call centers, on my budget, but make the biggest amount of positive impact, right? Minimum change, maximum impact. You're not going to walk into a bunch of developers who don't do good software security practice and all of a sudden go, by the way, tomorrow, since you guys suck at software security and secure code development, tomorrow I'm going to implement some new steps for you. Because you know what's going to happen? I'm going to throw you out that second-story window. So remember what your goals are. Are you trying to deter a casual attacker? Are you trying to slow them down long enough right? Slow the burn rate. Give yourself more time so that you have an opportunity to figure it out and respond. You want to be able to detect and react absolutely quickly and fortify where your deficiencies are, both from a people, process, and technology perspective, and optimize defenses that you have. Your red teams are really never done, which is a great part about red teaming. Once you're done, they come back and you work with them to figure out where things can be fortified better. And when they're done, they go out and try it again. So they'll find more holes. And then you come back and you do the same exercise. It's rinse and repeat until you get to a point where you feel it's good enough. Right? You've reached that level of, I've spent this much. It takes them this long. I feel comfortable with that. Let's leave it at that. Because things like business change, priorities change, technology changes, all this stuff changes all the time, in real time. Right? We're going mobile. We're going to the cloud. We're bringing our own devices. God knows what's coming tomorrow. If you can't adapt with it, because your business is doing acquisitions today, divestitures tomorrow, hiring today, laying off tomorrow, you got to move with the flow. Attackers always change. Their motivations, goals, their mindsets, their ages change. Right? They want different things. One day they want to take you down. The next day they just want to embarrass you a little. And your threats will always continue to evolve because you have to test your defenses in response. Using these real life types of attacks. Because you don't want to figure out you have major problems during a catastrophe. Right? So this is like the role of the Chief Chaos Officer as a final thought here. It's not something you're going to find on Monster yet. But I promise you within the next 10 years, there'll be somebody that'll have this role in most organizations. Start thinking about it now. It's that person who will be tasked with randomly walking around and pulling out the power in the most critical systems in the enterprise. And it will be a good thing. Ask Netflix how they do it. They love it. Because you want to definitely fail at your own hands and not at your enemies. Have a catastrophe when you're in charge, not when somebody else is. I'm done, hopefully on time. Thanks a lot. You guys have been cool.